Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is October 6, 2014. Just ending our weekend and starting our work week with a snow system across the eastern areas of the state, and we'll be on to that in just a moment, and your area forecast for public aviation and marine purposes in just a moment. Remember, when we're not on air, you can always see our information at www.arh.noaa.gov. And if you'd like to get your phone line information, you can call 1-800-472-0391 and get a weather forecast. And then you can also look up us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So now on to the important topics of the day, because we do have some winter weather advisories for snow continuing across the eastern areas from the upper Yukon Valley and the Tanana Valleys. As we expect snow to continue across these areas, possibly receiving up to 2 more inches of snow. And areas highlighted in red here have a blizzard warning out, and their warning is out through Wednesday at 6 a.m. The winter storm advisories for snow is out for or through Tuesday at 6 a.m. So this blizzard warning will see visibilities reduced to near zero along the south and northeastern areas of the Brooks Range on up towards the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. And again, that's out until 6 a.m. on your Wednesday morning. Now moving on to see what systems are bringing the weather towards our way. Along the area across the Bering, we have a low pressure system that's spinning just to the south of Shimia here. You can see a front is across the central part of the Aleutians and on down and towards the northern Pacific. Now putting that into motion one more time, this is bringing a bit of moisture across the Aleutian area and on up through the northern Bering. Some low clouds across the Bering Strait with some much colder temperatures that are being reinforced as we head through the late afternoon hours. So low clouds all across the northwestern areas and on through the northern parts of the Bering. Here's the front that stretches all the way from the western part of the Alaska Peninsula back towards the western areas of Shimia. A light break between the cloud systems as we have another reinforcing front just developing behind the main front that pushed through during the weekend. Now looking across the central areas of the state, some clouds across the Tanana and Yukon valleys and back towards the eastern part of the Alaska Range. We had some clearing across much of the southwestern areas, the Kenai Peninsula, as we had developed a little bit of an offshore flow. The clouds cleared out nicely all the way through Kodiak and across the southwest Bristol Bay. Across the southeast, mainly seeing partly cloudy skies all the way through the Gulf of Alaska. Along the northern Gulf areas, offshore flow still keeping things dry here, and then a slow changeover with cloudier conditions as the moisture is a little bit better where the system is had pushed through yesterday. Got some moisture all along the eastern areas where snow is falling through the day today, and like I said, expecting to continue through Tuesday and Wednesday. Now putting that into motion one more time, you can see another plume of moisture heading up towards the southeast. So good tap into the jet stream here, brings some moisture, and that's going to be affecting the area possibly as we head in towards the middle of the week. So putting that into motion one more time, you can see the drawing across the southwestern areas of the Gulf of Alaska, and taking a look at your map today to see what's happening at the surface. Well, here's a surface low just across the northern part of the Gulf. Northerly flow had developed behind this system, very weak at that. And then the next front that we're going to be looking at coming up towards the southeast is still well to the south of the eastern areas of the Gulf of Alaska. Partly cloudy skies across much of the southeast. The Panhandle, however, still in cloudy skies with a changeover from some isolated rain showers towards the southeastern areas of the Alaska Range, isolated snow showers. On north, we have some snow all across the Tanana and Yukon valleys all the way up through the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Another area of colder air is being reinforced by another cold front coming down through the northwestern areas, mainly just colder temperatures and cloudy along here with some breaks in the sky, especially across the southwest, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay Area, still seeing some clear conditions across there this afternoon. However, this occluded front that's just to the north of the Aleutians here, it's got a very tight gradient and rain that's been occurring along this frontal boundary. It's stationary, it hasn't made any progress during the day today, just continuing to bring this moisture up and keeping gusty gale winds all across the waters out there, with stronger gusts up to 45 to 50 miles per hour. Some light rain showers across the central areas in the Pribilofs, and then just a break between the two frontal systems with this next front developing to the south of the western Aleutians. Now, as we head into your forecast for tonight, this occlusion isn't going to make much progress, mainly just continue to stream moisture up ahead of it across the central parts of the Bering. Some light showers may make it ahead towards the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, we'll see drier conditions across much of the southwest and the western areas of the Gulf of Alaska as this northwest flow develops behind this weak low pressure system that remains in the northern Gulf. Some moisture just making it around the system, and upper level low system above this will bring some weak disturbances around, keeping chances for isolated shower activity along the coastal conditions here, with possible chances for snow across the eastern part of the Alaska Range as this weak troughing remains in place across the area, and low pressure that moved a front through yesterday is going to keep a boundary across the eastern areas of the state, and this tight gradient along the isobars will cause some gusty wind conditions to pick up as we head into tonight. Now, looking across the northwestern areas of the state, it looks fairly quiet. However, reinforcing cold temperatures are going to be diving down through the northwest. But drier conditions will prevail all across the western areas of the state. As we head into your day for tomorrow, expect that snow to continue across the central areas of the state and north, but begin to taper off from the southwest, and then mainly keeping some light snow activity along the eastern Beaufort Seacoast and also the eastern part of the Brooks Range. Along the Gulf waters, mainly a drying out pattern as we head later into your day on Tuesday. Can't rule out a few isolated shower activity in the morning and possibly early afternoon, but this drier air will come off the shore, keeping it mainly dry along the southwestern areas and back towards the western part of the state. This low pressure system that's in the North Pacific, with all the moisture that's streaming up towards the southeast, will mainly keep most of the moisture across the Dixon entrance here. So we might see some cloud activity move up from the system, keeping the southeast in clouds all day, and then this trough that remains across the eastern part of the Brooks Range will keep some cloud cover along the northern areas down towards the northern Lynn Canal here. So cloudy day for this area, but mainly dry as that low pressure system really stays south of the Dixon entrance for tomorrow. And then across the western part of the Gulf, rather benign with some light shower activity possible early in the day, and then drying out as we head into your Tuesday afternoon. across the eastern parts of the Bering, with this front staying mainly in place for another day through Tuesday. Just the rain will stay along the front, which will extend from the eastern part of the Aleutian Range and back towards the western part of the Bering. So rain along here, the Alaska Peninsula, looks like they will have one more day before the weather starts to really ramp up. As we head into your Wednesday, this low pressure system will begin to move further east, and this is going to tighten the gradient across the Alaska Peninsula and all across the areas of the Bering, all through the central Aleutians with the Pribilof Islands, really starting to see some wind gusts pick up and very steady as the gradient remains tight in that area as high pressure continues across the Bering Strait. Now look for some shower activity to move into the Alaska Peninsula on your day Wednesday as this front moves further to the east, and then some moisture continuing a little bit heavier perhaps across the eastern and central Aleutians, and still wet across the western part of the Aleutians and Bering. Now across the Gulf waters, another benign day as it's in between systems with high pressure, weak high pressure across the western areas of the state, and just weak low pressure that's continuing to weaken as this next system starts to move east. Now the low pressure from the North Pacific will push a little bit further to the north, perhaps bring some of this light rain activity into the southeastern areas, and then some light shower activity will remain across the northern panhandle back towards Yakutat. So a mix of rain and snow as we get into the colder temperatures as you move inland. Across the central areas of the state, finally a drying out pattern as we head into the day on Wednesday, with the northeastern areas starting to see the wind slacken off a little bit as this low pressure begins to weaken and shifts a little bit further to the east. Otherwise, quiet across the northwest on your day for Wednesday, just colder temperatures. Looking at your temperatures today, the southeast was the warmest as they cleared out. Briefly, getting temperatures up into the 50-degree range, 52 at several points across the southeast, but along the Gulf waters, mainly in the mid-40s for the remaining coastal areas. Across the interior, they saw temperatures dropping down into the lower 20s with a little bit of a climb towards just to the south of the Central Range area up to 32, and then along the Brooks Range and north, temperatures were in the mid-20s to upper 20s. Across the northwest area, they saw temperatures in the mid-30s today, with areas across the southwest all in the mid to upper 30s. Across the Alaska Peninsula, mild there with highs getting up into the mid-40s, and all across the chain, and this front bringing a little bit warmer temperatures out towards the western Aleutians with Shimia near 50. Looking at temperatures for tonight, we'll get quite cold across the interior areas with teens mainly across the eastern interior, and then along the coast a little bit warmer with temperatures dropping into the mid-20s. Along the coast in the upper 20s to the lower 30s, and across the southeast slightly more mild here with temperatures in the mid to upper 30s to near 40. And then your temperatures will climb up for tomorrow up to near 50 across the southeast. However, that might be inhibited by some of the clouds for the northern areas in the lower 40s, and the remainder of the Gulf will be in the lower to mid 40s. Interior areas again will see temperatures rising into the upper 20s, and along the Brooks Range and north one more day in the 20s with slightly cooler temperatures towards the Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula. Down towards the southwest, we'll see temperatures moderating to 30 to 40 degrees depending on your elevation. Across the Alaska Peninsula, temperatures in the mid-40s and in the 50s with warmer temperatures coming up from the North Pacific. Looking at your flying weather for tomorrow, MVFR conditions to IFR across the eastern areas of the state with this system along the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, and then also across the Bering. Look for MVFR to IFR along the occluded front, and MVFR conditions across northern areas of the southeast and along the front that's moving towards the Dixon entrance. Looking at your passes in more depth, we have Anaktuvuk Pass will be MVFR mainly with VFR at the south entrance. And then Adigan Pass will be MVFR. And we'll see Lake Charles and Merrill Pass through the day, VFR conditions, and Rainy Pass will be VFR as well. Looking at Windy Pass to be MVFR, and Isabel will be MVFR. Looking at Mentasta, IFR, and Tanita will go VFR to MVFR later in the day. Portage Pass will mainly be VFR during the day, with Chilkoot and White Pass staying MVFR. Looking at your freezing level is dropped down through the state with a 2,000 foot level to 4,000 across the Gulf waters, and 2,000 foot level across the northern part of the Bering to the 4,000 and 6,000 foot level towards the Aleutian chain. Your icing for tomorrow will be around the system that's in the Bering, with moderate icing across the central Aleutians, and then some light icing across the eastern areas of the state as the system tapers off, and possibly across the southeastern areas. Jet stream tomorrow will be a westerly flow out of and across the Aleutians here, strongest flow around the low pressure system moving up from the Pacific. Tomorrow's 9,000 foot winds, very similar, high pressure across the northern Bering, and a east to northeasterly flow across much of the state. Now looking at your 3,000 foot winds, offshore flow between 10 and 20 knots, and then across the Bering, very strong winds across the north side of this low, 50 to 60 knots along the Aleutians, and your turbulence mainly across this system in the Bering. So we'll be back in just a moment with your marine forecast.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. On behalf of Alaska Public Media, thank you for tuning in to Hangar Flying. This evening, we are honored to have Mr. Ron Sheardown on the show. Ron is an honoree in the 2014 Alaska Aviation Legends. This is a project that honors the men and women of Alaskan aviation and celebrates their contributions to aviation. Mr. Sheardown has had some amazing experiences as an aviator and as an explorer. Congratulations and welcome to the show, Ron.
Thank you.
You have over 19,000 hours and have flown all over the world. You've done quite a bit of flying, tracing historic routes and other Arctic adventures. Can you tell us a bit about your favorite flight?
Wow, all of them. Every flight is a pleasure. I think no matter how long or how short. And I've always said, anytime you fly and don't learn something, you better quit. I think that you have to keep learning. There's always something new out there. Just looking at the changes in navigation since I started flying 60-some years ago. You know, an NDB was a big thing to navigate with, and most of our Arctic navigation was celestial, and certainly our trips over the ice and to the North Pole and places like that, you carried a navigator and a sextant, and there was no other navigation. Today, you could practically sleep going to the North Pole with a GPS. Of course, I always take two in case one quits. But it's, you know, every day is a learning experience.
Now, you've been involved in some pretty high-profile rescues, including the rescue of a pilot that had been stranded for 58 days in the Arctic.
That's correct. Bob Gauthier went down the 2nd of February 1967, and we picked him up the 1st of April that year. And the search had been only lasted 2 weeks, and he was 2 miles outside the search area.
Wow.
And he did phenomenally well to survive. He lost about 60 pounds. I told him later that he was in better shape when we picked him up than when he went down because he was overweight. And Bob used to call me every year on April 1st, and we chatted away about what he was doing. He started Buffalo Airways, which is a very prominent program today called Ice Pilots, he just died last September, a year ago, and he lived another 45 years.
Thanks to you.
Yeah.
There's another rescue that people might not be familiar with, one that you did in 1964 when you went to look for a lost helicopter?
Yes. Well, that was an interesting one. I got a call. The RCMP in Canada would always call me if it was in the areas that I was working, like North Baffin Island or Greenland. They would always contact me on the HF radio and ask if I could assist. And they called that a helicopter had landed and run out of fuel, and he didn't know where he was. But he thought he was somewhere on the Melville Peninsula in the Canadian Arctic, and I was probably 200, maybe, yeah, about 200 miles away. And being as he could talk on his radio, his HF radio, when I was in the air, I asked him to hold his mic open for about 5 minutes, and I had a long wire antenna which I cranked out. And if you go out to second resonance on a long wire antenna, it becomes very directional. And I was able to scan back and forth on the horizon and pick up his peak. And I held that heading all the way and came straight to where he was. And he, of course, he called when he heard me and directed me into where he was. But it was interesting. And I was just reading last week in Nome a story about the Keybird, which was the B-29 that went down in 200 miles north of Thule in 1946. And they got an HF-DF heading from, I think it was Wainwright or Elmendorf, of a bearing of 046 from here in Alaska. And they actually flew that heading and found that airplane in North Greenland that way. And that was the only other time I've heard of someone using the HF as a direction finder.
Wow, we're so fortunate to have things like emergency locator transmitters and personal locator beacons nowadays. We're very fortunate.
You know, the whole...
well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that story with us. Folks, join us next time where we hear some more stories from Mr. Ron Sheardown, inductee in the 2014 Alaska Aviation Legends. Thank you.
Welcome back to the show, and we'll start our marine forecast with the ice maps. And you can see that there's some light icing that's occurring around the coast with these colder temperatures and the shallow waters. We are starting to develop ice. So otherwise the ice edge is still well offshore, but it is growing at this point. So expect to see ice on its way. Okay, and now down towards the southeast where it's completely open water and mainly a southerly light flow for your forecast on Tuesday, and expect seas to be between just 2 feet across the inner channels, and then your outer waters are going to be right around 7 feet all across the eastern part of the Gulf. And then as we head into your day on Wednesday with that front moving up, we're going to have a tighter gradient, faster wind speeds, so small craft across the outer waters between 25 and 30 knots out of the east, and then a northerly flow across your inner channels around 15 knots and 20 knots towards the Dixon entrance with a southeasterly flow there. 3 to 4 foot seas across the inner waters, and then around 6 to 9 feet with the highest seas towards the Dixon entrance. Looking at your south central forecast, mainly a northerly flow for your Tuesday, all under small craft advisory. So a rather nice day with seas between 2 and 4 feet across the western Gulf waters, 2 feet across the Prince William Sound, across a Cook Inlet down towards Shelikof Strait. We'll see between 2 and 4 foot seas. And then on your Wednesday forecast, maybe a small craft advisory for the Shelikof Strait and the southern Cook Inlet, but otherwise primarily a north to northeasterly flow as the low pressure system is moving off towards the eastern part of the Gulf. And then we'll have seas between 4 and 8 feet across the western Gulf, with seas between 3 and 6 feet with the slightly higher seas across the southern Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait around 7 feet. And then your Bristol Bay area and the northern Pacific around the Alaska Peninsula will see winds between 25 and 30 knots, small craft advisory mostly, except for just south of the Kodiak Island, maybe perhaps 15 knots with slightly higher gusts. Seas will be between 6 and 13 feet on the Pacific side and 5 to 8 feet across that Bristol Bay area. And then as we head into your Wednesday, the winds are going to pick up and be gusty out of the east between 30 and 40 knots. So we'll see mostly gale warning criteria around the Alaska Peninsula with 7 to 9 foot seas across the Bering and 14 to 16 across the northern Pacific. Now looking at your Aleutian chain for tomorrow, expect winds between 40 and 45 knots out of the east to northeast as you head towards Shemya, and seas will be mainly between 12 and 22 feet across the eastern central Aleutians, and then up to 27 feet as you head towards the western Aleutians. On your Wednesday forecast, expect a change of direction out of the east to southeast, and then be a little bit lighter wind speeds across the west and central areas, 20 knots with 35 to 40 knot gale criteria across the central and eastern Aleutians. Looking at your Tuesday forecast for the west coast, between 20 and 35 knots gale criteria across that northern Gulf waters near the Pribilof Islands. Seas will be between 6 and 14 feet, highest seas towards the Pribilofs with a northerly flow across the entire area. Gales again across much of the area except for when you head up towards the Seward Peninsula with winds out of the northeast there at 25. And then across the northern areas, expect some stronger winds across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, 25 to 35, and a little bit lighter on your Wednesday. Thanks for joining us.
These
See you tomorrow
forecasts
night.
are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.